Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Janmadya Sayatam Vayaritaratas Jatir Swaviga Swara Tene Brahma Rudaya Adikavaye Mojantija Surayat Tejo Varimrita Jata Vinimajo Jatra Trisagurum Risya Dhamna Svena Sada Nirasta Kuhakam Satyang Param Dhimahi.
O my Lord, Shri Krishna, son of Vasudeva.
O my Lord, Shri Krishna, son of Vasudeva.
O all-pervading personality of God.
O all-pervading personality of Godhead.
Our from a respectful obeisance unto you.
Our from a respectful obeisances unto you.
I meditate upon Lord Shri Krishna because he is the absolute truth.
I meditate upon Lord Shri Krishna because he is the absolute truth.
And the primeval cause of all causes.
And the primeval cause of all causes.
Of the creation, sustenance, and destruction of the manifested universe.
Of the creation, sustenance, and destruction of the manifested universes.
He is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations.
He is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations.
And he is independent because there is no other cause beyond him.
And he is independent because there is no other cause beyond him.
It is he only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge into the heart of Brahmaji.
It is he only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge unto the heart of Brahmaji,
The original living being.
the original living being.
By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion.
By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into
As one is
illusion.
bewildered by the illusory representation.
As one is bewildered by the illusory
Of water
representations
seen on fire or land seen on water.
of water seen to fire, of land seen to water.
Only because of him do the material universes,
Only because of him do the material universe
temporarily manifested by the reactions of the three modes of nature,
temporarily manifested by the reaction of the three modes of nature,
appear factual although they are unreal.
appear factual although they are unreal.
I therefore meditate upon him, Lord Shri Krishna,
I therefore meditate upon him, Lord Shri
who is
Krishna,
eternally existent in a transcendental abode,
who is eternally existent in the transcendental
which
abode,
is forever free from the illusory representations of the material
which
world.
is forever free from the illusory representation of material world.
I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth.
I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth.
Dharma truth, Bojita Kaitavotra,
Dharma Prujita Kaitavutra,
Paramo Nirmatsaranam Satam,
Paramo Nirmasaranam Satam,
Vedyam Vastavam Atra Vastu,
Vedyam Vastavam Astra Vastu,
Shivadam Tapa Trayon Bhuvanam,
Shivadam Ta Putrayo Mulanam,
Srimad Bhagavate Mahamuni Krite,
Srimad Bhagavate Mahamuni
Kimva
Krite,
Parerishwaraha,
Kimva Paririshwaraha,
Sadyo Hridi Avarudyatetra,
Sadyurudya Varidyatitra,
Kriti Bihi Sususabhistakshana,
Kritibhi Shushubhistatkyanat,
completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated.
completely rejecting all religious activities which are material motivated.
This Bhagavata Purana propounds the highest truth,
This Bhagavad Purana propounds the highest truth,
which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart.
which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in the
The
heart.
highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all.
The highest truth, the reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all.
Such truth uproots the threefold miseries.
Such a truth uproots the threefold
This
miseries.
beautiful Bhagavatam compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva in his maturity
This beautiful Bhagavatam compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva
is
is
sufficient
maturity.
in itself for God realization.
It's sufficient itself for God realization.
What is the need of any other scripture?
What is the need of the other scripture?
As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam,
As one attentively and submissively hears the message of
by
Bhagavatam,
this culture of knowledge,
by this culture of
the
knowledge,
Supreme Lord is established within his heart.
the Supreme Lord is established within his heart.
Nigama kalpataror galitam phalam,
Nigama kalpataror galitam phalam,
sukumukad amrita dravya samyatam,
Shukamukar Amritatrava Sangitam,
pibata Bhagavatam rasamalayam,
Vibhata Bhagavatam Rasamarayam,
muhur ahoraska bhuvibhavakaha.
Mura Hurasika Bhuvibhavuka.
O expert and thoughtful men, relish Srimad Bhagavatam,
O expert and thoughtful men, relish Srimad
the
Bhagavatam,
mature fruit of the desired tree of Vedic literatures.
the mature fruit, the desired fruit of the Vedic
It
literature.
emanated from the lips of Sri Sukadeva Goswami.
It emanated from the lips of Shukadev Goswami.
Therefore, this fruit has become even more tasteful.
Therefore, this food has become as more tasteful.
Although its nectarian juice was already relishable for all
Although each nectarian juice was really relishable for all,
including liberated souls.
including liberated souls.
Shinvatam Swakata Krishna.
Shramvatam Swakata Krishna.
Punya Shravana Kirtana.
Punya Shravana Kirtana.
Hridyantaksto hi abhadrani.
Hridyantastu hi abhadrani.
Vidunati Sahitsatam.
Vidunati Suritsatam.
To hear about Krishna from Vedic literatures,
To hear about Krishna from the Vedic
or to
literature,
hear from him directly through the Bhagavad-Gita,
or to hear from it directly from the Bhagavad-Gita,
is itself righteous activity.
it is self-righteous activity.
And for one who hears about Krishna,
And for one who hears about Krishna,
Lord Krishna, who is dwelling in everyone's heart,
Lord Krishna's dwelling within everyone's heart,
acts as a best wishing friend,
acts as the best wishing friend,
and purifies a devotee who constantly engages in hearing of him.
and purifies the devotees constantly engaged in hearing of him.
Nastapresu Bhadresu
Nasta Prayeshwa Bhadrishu
Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya
Nityam Bhagavata Seva
Bhagavati Uttamasloke
Bhagavati Uttamasloke
Bhaktir Bhavati Naistaki.
Bhaktir Bhavati Nastiki.
In this way, a devotee naturally develops his dormant transcendental knowledge.
In this way, devotee naturally develops dormant transcendental
As
knowledge.
he hears more about Krishna from the Bhagavatam
As he hears more about Krishna from Bhagavatam
and from the devotees,
and from the devotees,
he becomes fixed in the devotional service of the Lord.
he becomes fixed in devotional service of the Lord.
Tadarajastamo bhava
Tadara Justamo Bhava
kamaloba dayaschaye
Kamaloba
cheta
Dayaschaye
etar anavidam
Chetaitara Naviram
stitvam sattve prasidati.
Stitam Sarve Prasidati.
By development of devotional service,
By development of devotional service,
one becomes freed from the modes of passion and ignorance,
one becomes free from the mode, the passion of ignorance,
and thus material lust and avarice are diminished.
and thus material lust and avarice are diminished.
Evam prasana manaso
Evam Prasanna Manaso
bhagavat bhakti yogataha
Bhagavad Bhakti Yogata
bhagavat tattva vijnanam
Bhagavat Tattva Vijnanam
mukta sangasya jayate.
Mukta Sangasa Jayate.
When these purities are wiped away,
When all impurities are wiped away,
the candidate remains steady in his position of pure goodness,
the candidate remains steady in position of pure
becomes
goodness,
enlivened by devotional service,
becomes enlivened by devotional
and
service,
understands the science of God perfectly.
and understands the science of God perfectly.
Vidyate hridaya grantis,
Vidyate Hridaya Grantis
siddhyante sarva samsaya,
Siddhyante Sarva Samshaya
siyante jasya karmani,
Jyante Chasya Karmani
drishta evatmanishvare.
Drusta Evadmanishvari.
Thus bhakti yoga severs the hard knot of material affection
Thus the Bhakti Yoga severs the hard knot of material affection
and enables one to come at once to the stage of a samsayam samagram,
and enables them to come at once to the stage of Samsham Samagramam,
understanding of the supreme absolute truth, personality of Godhead.
understanding the supreme absolute truth, personality of Godhead.
Therefore, only by hearing about Krishna only by hearing from Krishna or from his devotee in Krishna consciousness
Therefore, only by hearing from Krishna or from his devotees in Krishna consciousness
can one understand the science of Krishna.
can one understand the science of Krishna.
Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 19, verse number 18. 18.
18.
Iti smaraja jayavasaya ukta.
No, the Evam, I think.
Wait a minute, 18, I'm sorry. Evam chatasmin naradeva deve.
Evam cha tasmin naradeva deve.
Prayo paviste divideva sangha.
Prayo paviste devi deva sangha.
Prasasya bhumo vyakiran prasunar.
Prasyasya bhumo vyakiro prasuneyu.
Muda muhurdun dubayas chanedu.
Muda muhurdundu bayas chanedu.
Translation by Srila Prabhupada. Thus the king, Maharaj Parikshit, sat to fast until death. All the demigods of the higher planets praised the king's action, and in pleasure continually scattered flowers over the earth and beat celestial drums. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Even up to the time of Maharaja Parikshit, there were interplanetary communications, and the news of Maharaj Parikshit's fasting unto death to attain salvation reached the higher planets in the sky, where the intelligent demigods lived. The demigods are more luxurious than human beings, but all of them are obedient to the orders of the Supreme Lord. There is no one in the heavenly planets who is an atheist or non-believer. Thus, any devotee of the Lord on the surface of the earth is always praised by them. And in the case of Maharaj Parikshit, they were greatly delighted and thus gave tokens of honor by scattering flowers over the earth and by beating celestial drums. The demigods take pleasure in seeing someone go back to Godhead. He is always pleased with the devotee of the Lord, so much so, by his adidevic powers, he may help the devotees in all respects. It's a demigod takes pleasure in seeing someone go back to Godhead. He is always pleased with a devotee of the Lord, so much so that by his adidevic powers he may help the devotees in all respects. And by their actions, the Lord is pleased with them. There is an invisible chain of complete cooperation between the Lord, the demigods, and the devotee of the Lord on earth. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So this is not a unusual thing that someone facing death choose not to eat anything. We can see that in the case of Prabhupada. If you read the Ocean of Mercy by Bhakti Charu Maharaj, he was shocked and overwhelmed with tears when Prabhupada told him, please don't cook for me anymore. And he tried to convince Prabhupada, please, you have to eat to keep up your strength. And Prabhupada said, no, this body is finished. I don't want to eat anymore. And I've seen that in other cases too, where even non-devotees, when they're approaching death, they stop eating. They have no appetite at all. Therefore, they intravenously give them glucose to keep them alive. But in the case of Maharaj Parikshit, he voluntarily chose not to eat anymore. So, when this news reached the heavenly planets, the demigods became very, let's say, enthusiastic to come and witness the departure of Maharaj Yudhisthira from his material body and his ascendance to the spiritual world. So, actually, in the case of a genuine devotee, death is a glorious thing. In the case of sense gratifiers, it's a miserable thing. It's full of grief. So, therefore, the art of dying, just like there's the art of living, but we're teaching the art of dying, so that something wonderful happens at the moment of death. And this is explained in the Bhagavatam also. The life and death of a devotee. So this is Srimad Bhagavatam, 1st Canto, 6th chapter. We've already read this, but I'm sure we all forgot. I forgot. 1st Canto, 6th chapter, 26th and 27th verse, where Narada Muni is speaking to Vyasadeva, and he says, Kṛṣṇa is speaking to Narada Muni, and he says, intelligence engaged in my devotion cannot be thwarted at any time, even at the time of creation, as well as at the time of annihilation. Your remembrance will continue by my mercy. Then that supreme authority personified by sound and unseen by eyes, but most wonderful, stopped speaking. Feeling a sense of gratitude, I offer my obeisances unto him, bowing my head. And Prabhupada writes, this is 1625, it's a prelude to what we're going to hear about the life and death of a devotee. That the personality of Godhead was not seen, but only heard, does not make any difference. The personality of Godhead produced the four Vedas by his breathing, and he is seen and realized through the transcendental sound of the Vedas. Similarly, the Bhagavad Gita is the sound representation of the Lord, and there is no difference in identity. The conclusion is that the Lord can be seen and heard by persistent chanting of the transcendental sound. And now, the next verse. Thus, I began chanting the holy name and fame of the Lord by repeated recitation. So when Narada Muni, after his mother died, he was roaming around, and after he spent 4 months with those pure devotees, Bhakti Vedantas, he tried to see the Lord again by internalizing his meditation, but it didn't work this time. He had seen him once before. And so he was like discouraged. But then the Lord spoke to him without being seen. And therefore, Narada Muni then says, thus I began chanting the holy name and fame of the Lord by repeated recitation, ignoring all the formalities of the material world. Such chanting and remembering of the transcendental pastimes of the Lord. So doing, I traveled all over the earth, fully satisfied, humble, and unenvious. So here Prabhupada explains in the purport, the life of a sincere devotee of the Lord is thus explained by Narada Muni by his personal example. Very seriously chanting of the glories of the Lord and traveling. Such devotees have no desire for material gain. They are conducted by one single desire, to go back to Godhead. This awaits them in due course on quitting the material body. Because they have the highest aim of life, going back to Godhead, they are never envious of anyone, and, according to personal capacity, to distribute the message for others' welfare without motive of material gain. Well, this is an exact explanation of a pure devotee. And yesterday I didn't finish reading this wonderful lecture by Prabhupada, and I will in a minute. But I want you to see this recurring theme throughout Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. That is, that the only business of the devotee is to chant and remember the holy name, fame, and pastimes of the Lord, and according to personal capacity, to distribute the message for others' welfare without motive of material gain. And then, so that's the life of a devotee, and now Narada Muni explains the death of a devotee. In text 27, he says, and so, O Brahmana Vyasadeva, he's speaking to Vyasadeva, right? Because he's Vyasadeva's guru, right? Vyasadeva accepted Narada Muni as his guru. And so, O Brahmana Vyasadeva, in due course of time, I, who was fully absorbed in thinking of Kṛṣṇa, and who therefore had no attachments, being completely freed from all material taints, meaning contamination, met with death, as lightning and illumination occur simultaneously. So he's describing what the death of a devotee is like. And he compares it to lightning and illumination occurring simultaneously. And okay, we can counterpoint this with a poem by Emily Dickinson. I don't know if you ever heard of her. We had to study her poetry in high school and college. Emily Dickinson. She's a famous American poet. And she wrote a little short poem, and she said, and she was a Christian. And so, ironically, she says, at the moment of death, instead of seeing the holy city of Jerusalem rising in the horizon and the glory of Jesus, I heard the buzzing of a fly. So she's saying, because they also explain in the Bible what a Christian will see at the moment of death. They'll see the holy city of Jerusalem rising, in the sunshine, and bright, and they'll see Jesus, and that for them is, ascendance to heaven, right? And she says, instead of seeing that, I heard a fly buzz. Bzzz. That's very cynical, But anyway, the difference is the devotee sees sighting at death is like lightning and illumination occurring simultaneously. So Narada Muni explains, to be fully absorbed in the thought of Kṛṣṇa means clearance of material dirts or hankerings. As a very rich man has no hankerings for small petty things, so also a devotee of Lord Kṛṣṇa, who is guaranteed to pass on to the kingdom of God, where life is eternal, fully cognizant and blissful, naturally has no hankerings for petty material things, which are like dolls or shadows of the reality, and are without permanent value. Well, this is a very important simile. He says, material things, petty material things, or hankering for petty material things, are like dolls or shadows of the reality. Just like if you go by and look in the windows of these modern stores, you'll see mannequins. They're like dolls, but they look exactly like human beings, and they're dressed, and they're in different shapes. Sometimes they move also. Sometimes they make moving mannequins. You actually think they're human beings. But he's comparing these dolls, and he says dolls or shadows of the reality. So these things in the material world, material opulence, beautiful bodies, and riches, and all these things, they're like shadows of the reality. And the shadow is just like my hand right now. The light is coming this way, and right here, I can see the shadow of my hand. And when I move my fingers, the shadow fingers move, right? But if I try and shake hands with the shadow, there's nothing there, right? So a shadow is only an indication of something that exists. And everything in this world is a shadow reflection of what's in the material world. But the real thing is in the material world, and the shadow reflection is illusory, or not illusory, but it's misleading. So if we chased after the shadow and missed the reality, we've wasted our life. That's the point. And like dolls or shadows of the reality, and are without permanent value. That is the sign of spiritually enriched persons. And in due course of time, when a pure devotee is completely prepared, all of a sudden the change of body occurs, which is commonly called death. As for the pure devotee, such a change takes place exactly like lightning and illumination follow, just like lightning and illumination follow simultaneously. That is to say, well, when there's lightning, there's tremendous amount of light, right? And then and immediately there's illumination. You're in the darkness, and there's a huge lightning. All of a sudden, everything lights up, and there's illumination. That is to say, a devotee simultaneously changes his material body and develops a spiritual body by the will of the Supreme. Even before death, a pure devotee has no material affection due to his body being spiritualized like a red-hot iron in contact with fire. So, as soon as you have a spiritual body, you begin to see Kṛṣṇa directly. So, therefore, the word lightning, it's like death for a devotee is a lightning change. And immediately, with that spiritual body, the material body changes to a spiritual body, you have illumination. You can see Kṛṣṇa. You can see the spiritual world. You can see Jerusalem rising in the horizon with Jesus, They describe it like that. But Emily Dickinson just saw a fly. So, very sad. So, this is very important. And yesterday we didn't finish the lecture by Prabhupada, so we'll finish it right now. And Prabhupada says that If a man from the Swapaka family, or dog-eating, or Chandala family, becomes a Vaishnava, strictly according to the orders, in other words, the orders meaning the principles, following the yamas and the niyamas, 4 things you shouldn't do, 4 things you should do, then he can become guru, but not a brahmana, if the brahmana is not a Vaishnava. Whoa! What does that mean? Well, previously Prabhupada gave an example of Gandhi. He said, just like Gandhi also went to jail, and so many others, but they were given the place of first-class prisoners. They got servant, they got separate bungalow and books, library, all facilities, but they cannot go out of the prison house. They are called first-class prisoners. So, to become a brahmana means to become a first-class prisoner, that's all. You see? We spoke about this yesterday. Prabhupada spoke about it yesterday in his purport. He was talking about brahmanas who sometimes initiate sudras, but they won't accept food from the sudra, their own disciple. Or these caste brahmanas who won't initiate sudras, or especially even lower than sudra, chandalas. They just ignore them. Because the brahmana is also a prisoner, but he's a first-class prisoner. We are third-class prisoner. He's first-class prisoner. He has a lot of perks, as they say. But a real brahmana, he engages in 6 ways of existence. He teaches how to do rituals, and he performs rituals. He teaches the Vedic knowledge, and he acts according to the Vedic knowledge. And he receives charity, and he gives charity. He doesn't keep the charity that he gives. He always remains, let's say, with a vow of poverty. So that's a real brahmana. But other brahmanas who want to use the charity to get their daughter married, or to have a better car, instead of a Ford, they get a BMW, and instead of, and they like to have, gold chains and gold rings and pearls and things like that, and they like to eat sumptuously, so they get a big fat stomach. And you see them often in South India. They're all fat. Not all of them, but a lot of them. So that's not brahmana. Brahmana is patana patana, yajana yajana, dana parigraha. He learns the Vedas and he teaches the Vedas. He does rituals and he teaches others how to do rituals. And he receives charity and he gives charity. So, everyone is conditioned by the material nature. Daivi esa gunamayi, Bhagavad-Gita 7:14. Brahmana means to be situated a first-class prisoner. A first-class prisoner is also prisoner. You cannot say that he is free. No, free is different from a first-class prisoner. Sometimes any respectable gentleman, some political offense, he's put into jail. Just like Gandhi also went to jail, and so many others. But they were given the place, first-place prisoner. They got servant. They got separate bungalow and books, library, all facilities. But they cannot go out of the prison house. They are called first-class prisoners. Gandhi also had his own goat in prison, and he used to milk the goat every day. And he had food for the goat. It was given by the British. And then he would drink the milk of the goat. And he had chickpeas, and he would soak the chickpeas. And that was his diet. He would eat chickpeas and drink goat milk. He would not accept the food that the British gave, because the British often put small amounts of poison to the Indian prisoners, especially the prominent ones who ate their food, and eventually, once they got out of prison, they would die very quickly. So, but Gandhi was able to only eat very simply inside the prison without touching the prison food. So, Prabhupada says, so our point of view is not to become a first-class prisoner, to get out of the prison. That is Vaishnava vision. Okay, so then, then he gave the example of Madhavendra Puri. Let me read that also, although we went over it yesterday. So he says, last night I also have given comments that Madhavendra Puri, he was performing the Anakuta ceremony and installing the deity, the Gopala deity. So everything was being Brahmana done by Brahmanas, qualified Brahmanas. But Madhavendra Puri initiated them again to become Vaishnavas. Then he gave them in charge of the deity worship. So the Vaishnava functions cannot be done even by a Brahmana. Even one is qualified Brahmana, he's unfit to propagate Vaishnava's philosophy. That is stated in the Shastra, Satkarma Nipuno Vipro, Mantra Tantra Visarada, Avaishnavo Guru Nasyad, Vaishnava Swapako Guru. Swapako means a Chandala, who is eating dog. That is considered the lowest. There are different kinds of meat eaters, but in India, the cow flesh eaters, there were none. Some of them were eating dogs, and hogs, even dogs. No government will not allow to eat cow flesh. No, that is not allowed. So he's saying basically no Vedic government would ever allow cow flesh to be eaten. If you want to eat flesh, you can eat hogs and dogs and other goats also, but you cannot touch a cow. This is restriction. First of all, there should not be meat eater. But if you are staunch meat eaters, then you cannot touch cow. So this, he's explaining what Vedic culture was like before, when it was actually practiced. However, the dog eaters, and he says in Korea and some parts there, they eat dogs. They also sell dog flesh publicly. So in India also there is a class in Assam Sahib, well, that's Nagaland. They eat also dog. So it's in northeastern India. So the dog eaters, they're considered lowest of mankind, Swapaka. Swa means dog, and Pacha means who cooks. So Swapacha means Chandala. If a man from the Swapacha family or the Chandala family, he becomes a Vaishnava strictly according to the orders, meaning the principles of Krishna consciousness, then he can become Guru, but not a Brahmana if he's not a Vaishnava. This is the strict. These are the rules. Even one is born in the family of a Brahmana, and he's not only born, he's qualified. Satkarma Nipuno. Nipuno means qualified. Brahmana has got 6 kinds of occupation. He must be learned himself. He must be able to teach others Vedic literatures. That's called patana. Then he must worship. Worship means demigods, or they consider that any demigod or god the same. These are some impersonalists. So yajna. There are others also, religious ritual functions they perform, that is called yajna. And dana parigraha, a Brahmana takes contribution. A Brahmana is never engaged in service like a Sudra, that is Sudra business. So these are called dharmas. There are so many departmental dharmas. So Arjuna is referring to this, that adharma abhibhavat Kṛṣṇa. When these principles are sacrificed and there is awakening of adharma, irreligious principles, then the result will be adharma abhibhavat Kṛṣṇa pradusyanti kulastriya, Bhagavad-Gita 1.40. Then the stricture will be withdrawn, and the family, women, they'll be polluted, and as soon as women are polluted, strisu dustasu. The woman is polluted, Varsneya, my dear Krishna, Jayate Varna Sankara. Then the whole population will be Varna Sankara. Children that are not trained properly and just cause a disturbance in society. And the next verse will explain how Varna Sankara population makes this world exactly like hell. That is stated. Sankaro narakayaiva kula gananam kulasyacha patanti pitaro piyasam lupta pinda udaka kriya. This will be explained next. So 5,000 years ago, You just try to understand how the society was going on strictly on the basis of Vedic principles. So now there is no such thing. Nobody is observing Vedic principles. And because the Vedic principles were strictly being followed, the whole world was one unit. There was one government, one world government, controlled by these Pandavas. Even the grandson of Pandavas, Maharaj Pariksit. This is on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. Then, when the battle was over, the next king was Maharaj Pariksit, grandson of Arjuna. Up to that time, everything was in order, according to Vedic principles, all over the world. That's why you see similarities between Inca pyramids and the pyramids in Egypt and different pyramid-like structures in India. There was one world government at that time, and it was all managed by the Pandavas. And before that, Lord Ramachandra also, and then other great kings. So then he says, up to that time, everything was in order, Vedic principles all over the world. There was no question of eating meat. The same principles were followed. No meat eating, no illicit sex, no gambling, no intoxication. Because the king was very strong, Maharaj Pariksit. When he saw that a black man was going to kill one cow, immediately he took his sword. Who are you? I shall kill you immediately. That was the king's stricture. So the Kali was ordered to get out of his kingdom. He begged for his life. Sir, you are going to kill me. But it is my time now. I have now come, and it is my business, cow killing. So what can I do? This is my business. So Maharaj Pariksit understood that now Kali Yuga is coming. So it is his business. So he said, I am, as king, how can I stop Kali's business? That is another problem. One must be occupied, one must be engaged in his business. Therefore, he asked him to go to these places, where to stay in the slaughterhouse, in the brothel for illicit sex, and the slaughterhouse and in the drunkard den for intoxication, and gambling places. So Kali was in difficulty to find out a place like that in that time. He could not find. Therefore, there was conspiracy to kill the king so that Kali can enter. That's why Kali corrupted the mind of Shringi, the son of Samika Rishi, and Shringi unnecessarily and unjustly cursed Maharaj Pariksit to die immediately by the bite of a flying snake. So these are the principles. This is called human society. Varnashrama Charavata Purushena Parak Pumam. Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya 858. In human society, Vishnu Aradyate, the Lord is worshipped. But Nate Vidu Swartakatim Hi Vishnum, at the present moment, these principles, these rascals, they do not know. Andayatandar Upaniyamana. And so the so-called leaders, they are blind themselves, and they are trying to lead other blind men. This is the social position today. Therefore, there's no more hope of reviving the Vedic culture. But by the grace of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Chaito Darpana Marjanam, the Vedic culture means to cleanse the heart and make him perfect, Brahma Bhuta, perfectly spiritualized. That is Vedic culture. Vedaischa sarviraham eva vedya, through all the Vedas I am to be known, Kṛṣṇa says in Bhagavad-Gita 15:15. To know the Supreme Lord, that is Vedic culture. Now everything is topsy-turvy. Therefore, by the grace of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he has simply recommended Harinama, Harinama, Harinama eva kevalam. Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi 17.21. Only chant. Then the result will be Chaito Darpana Marjanam. The Chaitanya Charitamrita Antya 20.12. The same result as the Vedic culture introduced will purify the heart to understand one's position. By chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra, the same position will come. It is so nice. Kirtanad eva Krishnasya mukta sangha param rajet. Srimad Bhagavatam 12:3-51. Therefore, there is no question of being depressed that, oh, we do not belong to this caste, do not belong to that caste. Never mind. Whatever it is, simply chant and you'll become purified. That is Krishna consciousness movement. Thank you very much. So, Lord Chaitanya has done an amazing thing. He understood completely the dilemma of people in Kali Yuga. And Kali Yuga cannot be stopped because it's ordained by the Lord that it's going to happen like this. But because the Lord ordained Kali to do his job and to corrupt people, to eat meat and have illicit sex and gamble and intoxicate, he also came as Lord Chaitanya and said, look, I know how difficult it is, therefore just chant Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare. Just chant sincerely. Now offer your food to Krishna and with a little bit of love and affection, and he'll give it back to you as Mahaprasadam, and you'll become purified very easily. And always listen to Bhagavadgita and Srimad Bhagavatam spoken by genuine devotees. And go out on Sankirtan, chant, dance, and give prasadam to everyone. And Lord Chaitanya, by the way, never preached in public. Did you know that? He never gave classes in public. He only spoke with confidential devotees, and just a few of them, about the philosophy. Unfortunately, Kṛṣṇa Kaviraj recorded those conversations. But he never preached in public. He just did ecstatic Sankirtan, distributed food, and just got everyone happy. Chant Hare Krishna. Now, in the 9th chapter, 26th verse, which says, Patram pushpan phalam toyam yome bhakta prayachati, tadaham bhakti paratam asnami prayatatmanaham. Krishna says, if one offers me with love and devotion a leaf, a flower, a fruit, or water, I will accept it. And Prabhupada writes, for the intelligent person, it is essential to be in Krishna consciousness, engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord, in order to achieve a permanent, blissful abode for eternal happiness. Notice these words, a permanent, blissful abode for eternal happiness. When Prabhupada says, or when it's said, going back to Godhead, that means we were there originally. But for some crazy reason, we voluntarily chose not to be there and to come to this material world on the prospect of making money and having sense gratification and having power and exploiting others. Right? What a crazy thing. We gave up eternal life in the spiritual world. But now the process for going back to God has become so easy. And let's hear what he says. The process of achieving such a marvelous result is very easy and can be attempted even by the poorest of the poor without any kind of qualification. The only qualification required in this connection is to be a pure devotee of the Lord. It does not matter what one is or where one is situated. The process is so easy that even a leaf or a little water or fruit can be offered to the Supreme Lord in genuine love, and the Lord will be pleased to accept it. No one, therefore, can be barred from Krishna consciousness because it is so easy and universal. Who is such a fool that he does not want to be Krishna conscious by this simple method and thus attain the highest perfectional life of eternity, bliss, and knowledge? Krishna wants only loving service and nothing more. Krishna accepts even a little flower from his pure devotee. He does not want any kind of offering from a non-devotee. He is not in need of anything from anyone because he is self-sufficient, and yet he accepts the offering of his devotee in an exchange of love and affection. To develop Krishna consciousness is the highest perfection of life. Bhakti is mentioned twice in this verse in order to declare more emphatically that bhakti, or devotional service, is the only means to approach Krishna. No other condition, such as becoming a brahmana, a learned scholar, a very rich man, or a great philosopher, can induce Krishna to accept some offering. Without the basic principle of bhakti, nothing can induce the Lord to agree to accept anything from anyone. Wow. So, did you realize that bhakti is so easy? You see? The Lord made it very, very easy for everyone, including even the lowest of the low. And that's also explained. Kṛṣṇa, Hunanda, Pulinda Pulkasa, Abir Sumba Yavana Kasadaya, Yene Chapapa, Yad Apastrayastraya, Sudayanti Tasmai Prabhavishnave Namaha. The Kuratas, the Hunas, the Andras, the Pulindras, the Pulkasas, the Abhiras, the Sumbas, the Yavanas, the members of the Kasa races, and even others addicted to sinful acts can be purified by taking shelter of the devotees of the Lord due to his being the supreme power. I beg to offer my respectful obeisances unto him. So this is Srimad Bhagavatam, 2nd Canto, 4th chapter, 18th verse. So who are the Kuratas? The Kuratas are the Biharis, but actually the aboriginal tribes in India. And they live mostly in Bihar, because Bihar is where that jungle is, the jungle that Lord Chaitanya danced through and made the animals chant. Jharkhand. Is that in Bihar? Oh, okay. And also, the Hunas. The Hunas are, live in East Germany and in parts of Western Russia. And they're also known as hill tribes. And then Andhra, the Andhra Pradeshis. It says a province in southern India mentioned in the Bhisma Parva of Mahabharata. It is still extant, meaning it's still existing under the same name. So that's why sometimes the Telanganas don't want to be associated with Andhras. One time I went to a temple. I won't say where it is. And in that temple, there are devotees that are, they used to be all Andhra Pradeshis, but now there's a group of them that are Telangana and another group that are Andhra, you know. So the Andhras and the Telangana devotees got into arguments. So, and I quoted this verse to them. So the Telangana people, they were really cheering, you know. But that's not the point. The point is that let's hear what this verse is about. And then the Pulindras, they're mentioned in Mahabharata. They're the province of Pulinda. They were conquered by Bhismasena and Sahadev. And these are known as the Greeks. And it's also mentioned one day they will invade and rule over most of the world. Well, they did. They invaded India and many other places at one time. And then they gave up Brahminical culture, and they're mentioned as Malechas, just as those who are not followers of Islamic culture are called Kafirs, and those who are not followers of the Christian culture are called heathens. So we see there's not a big difference between the Jews, the Christians, and the Muslims, because they always divide people. Either you're a Jew or a non-Jew, or you're a Christian or a non-Christian, or you're a Muslim or a non-Muslim. They create that type of classification, but that's not Vedic culture. Vedic culture, as we just heard, even the lowest class people can become pure devotees and gurus if they follow Krishna consciousness. There's no obstruction of any class or no class. Even the no class people can become pure devotees if they're willing to be trained. And then the Abhiras, this also appears in the Mahabharata, and these people live on the river Saraswati in Sindh, and the modern Sindh province formerly extended onto the other side of the Arabian Sea. So in other words, it included Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, all those places. And today, it says that the Abhiras They were under the domination of Maharaj Yudhisthira, and according to the statements of Markandeya, the Mlechas of this part of the world would also rule over Bharat. Later on, this proved to be true, as in the case of the Pulindas. On behalf of the Pulindas, Alexander the Great conquered India, and on behalf of the Abhiras, Muhammad Ghori conquered India. So that's, Muhammad Ghori's conquered India. He destroyed the Shiva Linga, the gold Shiva Linga that was floating in the air. It was not being held by anything. And the temple of, what's the name of that temple in Gujarat? Huh? Somnath, yeah. Hey, when the Muslims enter the temple, they see this gigantic golden Shiva Linga floating in the air. They couldn't understand how it's going on. Muhammad Ghori was smart. He had told one of his guys, go up on the roof, break the roof, and see if you can see this thing floating. And when they broke the roof, or part of the roof, there was a gigantic magnet in the attic. And that's what was holding the Shiva Linga in the air. And finally, the Shiva Linga, when they touched the magnet, finally the Shiva Linga started moving, and they realized that they could knock it down and steal it, which is what they did. So, but these Abhiras attacked India many times after Muhammad Ghori, and destroyed Somnath at least, I think it was 11 or 13 times. 16, 17 times they destroyed that temple, and after India got its independence, he rebuilt the temple. That just shows you the persistence of Vedic, the Vedic tradition, that even though it was destroyed so many times, they rebuilt it. It's there today. Anyway, the Abhiras were also formerly Kshatriyas within the Brahminical culture, but they gave up the connection. The Kshatriyas who were afraid of Parasurama and had hidden themselves in the Caucasian hilly regions, that's where my people come from, later on became known as the Abhiras, and the place they inhabited was known as Abhira Desha. And then the Sumbas, the inhabitants of Kanka province of Old Bharat, mentioned in the Mahabharata. And then the Yavanas. Yavana was the name of one of the sons of Maharaj Yayati, who was given the part of the world known as Turkey to rule. Therefore, the Turks are Yavanas, due to being descendants of Maharaj Yavana. The Yavanas were therefore Kshatriyas, and later on, by giving up Brahminical culture, they became Mlecha Yavanas. The description of the Yavanas are in the Mahabharata, Adi Parva 85.34. Another prince called Turvasa was also known as Yavana, and his country was conquered by Sahadeva, one of the Pandavas. The western Yavana joined with Duryodhana in the Battle of Kurukshetra under the pressure of Kṛṣṇa. It was also foretold that these Yavanas would conquer India, and it proved to be true. Yeah, it's like the Afghanis. There probably was the western Yavanas. And then you have the Turks. So Kasa, the inhabitants of Kasa Desha are mentioned in Mahabharata, Drona Parva. Those who had a stunted growth of hair on the upper lip are generally known or called Kasas. As such, the Kasas are the Mongolians and the Chinese and others who are so designated. The above-mentioned historical names are different nations of the world. Even those who are constantly engaged in sinful acts are all corrigible. That means they can all be corrected to the standard of perfect human beings if they take shelter of the devotees of the Lord. Jesus Christ and Muhammad, two powerful devotees of the Lord, have done tremendous service on behalf of the Lord on the surface of the globe. And from the version of Srila Sukadeva Goswami, it appears that instead of running a godless civilization in the present context of the world situation, if the leadership of world affairs is entrusted to the devotees of the Lord, for which a worldwide organization under the name and style of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness has already been started, then by the grace of the Almighty Lord, there can be a thorough change of heart in human beings all over the world, because the devotees of the Lord are able authorities to effect such a change by purifying the dust-worn minds of the people in general. So you see what the mission of Krishna consciousness is. But yet, Prabhupada is giving credit to Jesus Christ and Muhammad. I have a friend of mine who went to Pakistan recently. And he said, I have to admit one thing. That country is God conscious. Everywhere you go, there's Allah. There's something, some place, some pilgrimage. There are mosques all over the place. There's calling the people to prayer 5 times a day. And the people always say, Inshallah, MashaAllah. They're all the time they're talking about Allah. He said, it's a place where there's a lot of spirituality. Now, it might be corrupted in some way or other, he said, but it's more God conscious than India. He said, I can tell you that right now. So that was his impression. I mean, he's been to India many times also. But that was his impression of Pakistan. That's, of course, his opinion. Okay, so what is the point of all this? The point of all this is yesterday we went to Shoreline for the first time. And we were given permission by the Black Coffee Company. It's owned by black girls, and they serve black coffee. And they get a lot of customers waiting in line with their cars. So anyway, right down the street from the Black Coffee Company is a methadone clinic where drug addicts come to get methadone so they can wean themselves off, which never really happens, from heroin. They're heroin addicts mainly. So these are really very stressed, very, let's say, low energy people, because they're recovering drug addicts. So they were coming one at a time slowly from the clinic, which is like a block away, and walking toward the Black Coffee Company up to a bus stop where they hang out after they get their methadone, And so I was standing on the sidewalk, and as they walked by, I stopped and I said, you can get some free food. They said, what? I said, there's free food. Free food? I'm hungry. So we got a whole bunch of these people that came to the truck. And then the Black Coffee Company, they were really happy that we were there, because that way they don't, very few of those people enter into the coffee shop. And most of the people, no one's allowed to get in there anyway. And most of the people come in with their cars. So they were happy we were there, because we were helping. And that's the thing about the food truck. It serves the people who are most in need, the lowest of the low, and they're not being helped other than being given let's say, proxy drugs like methadone. Methadone is also a drug, right? So I realized that our best customers are the lowest class people, because we have a way of helping them. I myself was a drug addict at one time, so Kṛṣṇa consciousness helped many hippies that were drug addicts get cured almost immediately by living a structured life in a temple. So Shoreline is the best place, I think, to start a small temple where we actually make it a temple where people can get rehabilitated and become whole again, become healed again. It's a great place because you have a large population of people that are like really, really in need of something that can help them. And when I was talking to these people, I could see them. They were really down, and not much hope of getting out of their addiction. So that's why, if we do things like this, then it'll be noticed by the effect. Now, I used to go every day when I was in Berkeley to People's Park, where there's the lowest of the low. I don't know if you've ever been to People's Park, but they're really low-class people there. They sleep there, they pass stool there, they take drugs there. And I used to go there every day and feed them for about 4 years. And some of those people became devotees. And I think I told a story about that one devotee who became, he was really, at first he wouldn't even take the prasadam, but later on he moved to, after he got initiated, he moved to Vrindavan, he learned Sanskrit, and he's still there, he's distributing books every day, So if you can rehabilitate people like that, that is the real, let's say, it's just like Jagai and Madai, they were rehabilitated by Lord Chaitanya. And that's the challenge. And if we do that, then that could become very, very significant as far as recognizing the value of Krishna consciousness. Because there are more and more people becoming addicted to drugs in this country, and it's ruining their lives. And if we can help some of those people, that would be greatly appreciated by, and it's not like a prison preaching, They're already committed crimes, they're in prison, and so forth. This is kids, most of them are kids that have ruined their lives by drugs, and the only solution that the city has is to give them methadone instead of heroin, which methadone is another drug. It's not as devastating as heroin, but it's definitely a drug. So, and they stay on it forever almost, and this one girl came yesterday, and she lost her little box of methadone. Well, that's devastating for her because they won't give her another one, and she'll have to wait a whole week, and during that week she's going to suffer terribly because she has to have heroin or she has to have methadone. So you see, these are what you call the dead-end people, and there's more of them all the time now. So I think it's a calling for us to do something more than simply give them prasadam. So that's just an idea that we're going to develop. So are there any questions? Okay, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
I just remember being on that park